So I recently did a video about stop buying new games and talking about the fact that there's 5,000 plus games a year coming out at this point. But are we just repeating ourselves at this point? Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and that's the question I want to discuss today. Are board games getting old? Are we just repeating ourselves? Do we ever really see anything new? I was in Toronto this past week, hanging out with my family, and I was talking to my brother, and he was talking about how he kind of feels a little less interested in board games than he used to be this past year or two. He's been less invested, less involved, less interested in the newest thing. Now, context and caveats aside, he's interested in board games to a degree. He's not interested in board games the same way I am. We both like the hobby, very different levels of liking the hobby. But he's been less excited by the new stuff. He's been less intrigued by the new stuff, partially because the new stuff stops seeming new to him. It stopped seeming like there was new stuff, innovative ideas, interesting things, and now he's viewing the hobby more of a homework assignment to read a new variation upon itself, a new version of the same mechanics pasted together in slightly different ways, giving him all the homework of a new experience, but with none of the satisfaction of something new. It's all the same. It's another version of worker placement. It's another way that you're building a deck. It's another way of diving into a dungeon. They're assigning you the homework, they're assigning you the cost of acquiring their game, they're assigning you all the teaching of the game to a new group. All the costs are still present, but the payoff is more and more diminishing for him. And with 5,000 games coming out a year, that has to be happening for all of us. Is it me that's blind? Is it me who still loves exploring and finding new games? Am I the one who's missing something? Am I the one who's signing up for the acquisition, the teach, the learn, and all those factors, the setup, the teardown, the mental obligation of all the games on my shelf? Am I signing up for that just because I like board games, but with no rational reason behind it? That video, stop buying new games, I'll link to it down below, but I'll hit some notes of that video because I think they're relevant for this discussion, but the idea is 5,000 games right now are coming out a year, 5,000 board games, and even once you start applying filters, even when you remove all the garbage that has, 2 reviews from the person's, husband and their father, or who knows, whatever it is, 2 people who played the game with them once upon a time, even once you remove the things that are less likely to be something that most people want to pay attention to. Even once you filter it down to a fairly high degree of ratings precision, it must have 100 ratings, the rating should be at least a 7 above, whatever you apply to it, you're still left with roughly 500 games a year that are theoretically worthy of paying attention to. There's not 500 new things being brought into the hobby every single year. There just isn't. I mean, practically speaking, if we look at 2019 through 2021, if you go on Board Game Geek, if you use advanced search, if you filter from 2019 to 2021 and you filter for the best games in 2019 to 21, here are most of them. Okay, if you ignore straight repeats and straight second editions, here are most of the best games from that range, the highest rated games on Board Game Geek. We have Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, we have Dune Imperium, we have Wingspan, we have Ark Nova, we have Lost Ruins of Arnak, Marvel Champions, Cascadia, Cthulhu Death May Die, Sleeping Gods, and Beyond the Sun. That's just a sampling of the best ones. Literally, like if you just rank it, if you sort it in terms of the ranking order on Board Game Geek, those are the best games that we have in the past 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. In a 3-year period, I just listed like 11 or 12 games. What's something new in those games? Tell me a new mechanic. Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is basically just Gloomhaven. That's nothing new. We can move on directly. We have Dune Imperium. And Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion brought us, the book. Except it didn't really bring us the book. It wasn't the first game to bring us an exploratory book. We had Stuffed Fables before that, and I'm sure we've had things before that. We have Dune Imperium bringing us worker placement and deck building, the combination of 2 mechanics. But what's really new there? What's the interesting thing? It's a new variation and twist upon worker placement and deck building. What's the real new aspect that Dune Imperium brought to the table, and yet now it's in the top 20 or so on Board Game Geek? That's insane. We have Wingspan. Wingspan from Stonemaier Games. What did it do that was interesting? What did it do that was different? What mechanic did it bring to the table? We have Ark Nova. So you're building a zoo. It's basically Terraforming Mars with a zoo. It's not exactly Terraforming Mars, but it's got all the tableau building. It's got the symbols. It's got the whole requirements and giving you more symbols, which count towards different objectives and goals in different ways. It has a lot of overlap with Terraforming Mars, while being different, sure, but different in what real way? What thing did it do that was different, that stood out? Lost Ruins of Arnak, another deck building worker placement. Whoop-de-da, how many of these do we need to see? We have Marvel Champions. Congratulations, you have a deck of cards. You're basically Lord of the Rings, the card game, with some slight polish applied to it. We have Cascadia. I love that game, but Lord knows I don't know what it's doing that's interesting or different. It's literally just point-scoring combinations. I don't know what it's doing that's innovative. We have Cthulhu Death May Die. Granted, I love the insanity track that brings to the table. The idea of pushing and pulling your insanity in order to get a more powerful ability, but potentially risking all the things along the way. The Others from Eric Lang did that a few years earlier. Same company, same designer, same concept being brought to the table. And the rest of the time you're rolling dice against monsters. What is it doing that's different? Sleeping Gods, it is notable. Sleeping Gods is incredible in what it's doing, but so many games have done that. So many games have given us a sandbox exploration, given us a giant book of story scripts to read through. What is Sleeping Gods doing that's different? And Beyond the Sun, tech trees and flying through space, not really flying, slight degrees of area control. What is different in these games? We're just rehashing the same thing. We're repackaging it, we're twisting it up, we're adding some polish. What is different? The video, Stop Buying New Games, is focused on the idea that you should stop buying new games. It was focused more on being precise and applying filters to yourself, but filters that would eventually result in you buying these. According to that video, if you follow the tenets of that video, if you follow the idea of waiting and holding off, then that video would still tell you, great, congratulations, you've waited your year and a half, now go ahead and buy all the games that I just talked about. Time has passed, they're stuck around, they're clearly well rated, they're clearly well loved, they're not just the game of the moment, they are games that have lasted. So go buy those 12 iterations upon game mechanics that we've already talked about. Are board games getting old? Are we seeing anything new anymore? It doesn't matter. See, board games are like any other medium, and we're really very much in the heyday of that transitionary aspect of the medium. A medium exists. The medium gets popular. The medium attracts works of passion as much as it does business, especially with something like this, and especially in a hobbyist medium. You have people who are interested in doing it just for the sake of the hobby, and then there's people who are trying to make money on it. The medium continues to expand and continues to expand, eventually getting to a point where it's delivering more content in the medium than anyone can reasonably absorb. And at that point, you start seeing a fracture. At that point, you start seeing a fracture of AAA companies, of the biggest companies in that space thriving, of people who are willing to truly sacrifice for their passion, also continuing to grow and to develop the indie of the hobby, and you tend to see the middleman suffer a bit. Which, by the way, we're seeing all of this in board games. You apply to whatever it is, movies, TV shows, books, music, whatever it is you want to apply it to. Any form of entertainment has had the same development. Video games. You see the medium get popular, you see it start to have way too much content. No human being ever will read anywhere near the amount of books that are put into circulation. I think that I read some sort of article that gave, it referenced the idea that the average human will read like 4,000 books in their life. Something like that. It might even be less than that. But just practically speaking, maybe I think it was less than that. I think it's the average, I think it was like a few hundred. I think right now, if you're an adult, male, female, whatever, you probably have several hundred books left in your life to read. I think the average male reads like 4 or 5 books a year. The average human, not male. The average adult reads 4 or 5 books a year. And that means if you live another 80 years or so, that's not a lot of books left. Now, granted, if you're reading a book or two a week, you're probably ahead of the curve. But we're talking about averages here. It's a little bit depressing to think that I'll only potentially read another 300 books the rest of my life. It's a little depressing to think about it, but it's true. I don't read that many new books anymore. Any medium develops to the point where you can no longer possibly absorb all the content. Again, we see this with every one of the Netflix shows or the Hulu shows or any number of streaming service shows that pop up. Netflix finally lost subscribers for the first time in years and decades, or whatever it's been. Not decades it hasn't been around for. You have video games constantly putting out way more content than any human being could ever possibly play, despite the fact that video gamers will still manage to, stock up on the Steam fall sale and the Steam winter sale, gathering all those video games that they eventually will play one day totally, but not really. I probably shouldn't be so judgmental, as I'm surrounded by board games I still haven't played. And we're seeing this in board games. The medium grows. The medium starts overpopulating the amount of possible consumption within the medium. But passion always exists. And passion results in this weird aspect of the AAA, the large companies getting to a point of thriving, the people who are willing to inject their passion for low pay, low returns, starting to build, and the middle class suffering the most. Those smaller companies, which are not quite, the giant corporations of the space, but it's unfortunately has past being a passion project and they need money to pay the bills, those ones tend to suffer the most. And we're seeing that now in board games too. The whole Kickstarter challenge that we're seeing of the various companies seeing more and more difficulties when a unexpected bill hits their desk. It's just the nature of being someone who's trying to make it as a business, so you can't just run it on your free time, but you also don't have the padding and the backing of being a full developed larger company that has 15, 20 titles under your bar. If you launch a Kickstarter and you need that Kickstarter to succeed for your company to succeed, it means you're one bad project away from failure. This is totally unrelated to my conversational thing about board games getting old, by the way. It's just a bit of a side thing. It's more of a comparison point to the movies, TV shows, books, all of that. Because in all those mediums that I talked about, the reason I got on that sidetrack, the reason I started talking about that, is all of these mediums have something interesting in common. Again, movies, TV shows, books, video games, music, board games. They all have something in common. How many different ways can you tell a story? How many different ways can the hero survive, thrive, win the day? How many different ways can boy meet girl, boy and girl fall in love happily ever after? How many ways can you pace out the beats of a song? And Vsauce, by the way, if you don't know the channel Vsauce actually has an excellent video talking about this. Music has a finite number of chords. If you assume an average length to a song, let's say 4 minutes for a song, there's literally a finite number of possible chord sequences you can have to actually produce something. Now that might sound scary. That is, the number is pretty intensely large. But then we do like patterns, but then if you ever watched, I'll link to it down below, if you ever watched the Axis of Awesome, the 4 chords song, I think it's called the Axis of Awesome, I believe it's called, but the 4 chord song. It's a song that's basically going through how all songs are utilizing the same beats again and again and again and again. It's fascinating. I'll link down below if you haven't watched it. It is so worth, honestly, don't watch the rest of this video. Watch that. It's far more entertaining. But how many ways can you pace up the beats of a song? How many ways can you develop a new video game? What's the newest way? You have a gun, you equip it, you hit R to reload if you're playing on PC, otherwise it's a controller thing. Then you turn around and shoot. How many different ways can you develop that same title? I'm asking Activision and Call of Duty this question at this point, because honestly, they keep trying. But how many different ways can you have the exact same thing done and done and done again? How is it that we continue to have movies again and again? Hundreds of movies come out every single year, and people pay to go see those movies. People buy those movies. Granted, 78% of them are superhero movies at this point, but how many different ways can you continue to rehash the same content and still have people continue to engage in the medium as they continue to do so? TV shows aren't dying. Movies aren't dying. Video games aren't dying. Board games aren't dying. All these industries are doing just fine. We'll have a whole sub-conversation about the death of innovation, and that is a conversation we can have. But iteration is still present. Iteration, innovation, exploration within the same concepts is still something that's present. Because the answer is, it doesn't matter how many different times you do tell a story, sometimes a new way manages to hit home in a way that other stories haven't before. Somehow the beats of what you're doing, despite having nothing new under the sun, because nothing new under the sun really does exist at this point, but you manage to hit on something slightly different. I don't know if you've watched a lot of movies, but if you ever remember the days of The Italian Job, of Ocean's 11, of The Prestige, when you'd have like a movie with a genuine twist that shocked you. Like these things just messed with your mind. Contrasted with myself watching The Sixth Sense with my wife a few years back for the first time. Not my first time, her first time. And she called out the twist a mile away. Because we start seeing patterns in these things. Things start losing their freshness. Innovation definitely does die. But developments and twists to that, everyone watching this can list a TV show that blew their mind. Queen's Gambit's fantastic, by the way. You should check out that one. But so are dozens of others. There are TV shows that do an excellent job of managing to do something new with old material. There are movies that aren't just Marvel movies. There are movies that manage to tell a new story with stuff we've already seen. The Gentleman, by the way, from... I can't remember the designer's name. The director's name. But, Ridley Scott? No, not Ridley Scott. The other one. But The Gentleman. Great movie. Worth watching. But there's always a good movie out there. There's always a good book. There's always something that's done with those things. See, out of those 500 games, there's 500 games that come out every single year. The 500 ones that are worth paying attention to. There's 5,000 games that come out every year. Out of those 500 games that come out every single year, I just recently did another video. I'll link to that down below as well. But I did another video of the 169 games I played in the first quarter of 2022. The 169 different unique games I've played, new and old. And going through my top 50 of those, so many of them stood out as games that I really, really love. And settling from those 50, trying to pick out some of the newest titles within those 50, are some of the games I have on the table here. We have Mind MGMT. We have Mythic Mischief. We have Unsettled over here. We have Anno 1800. We have Anno 1800 over here. We have Paris. We have Welcome to the Moon. Encyclopedia is one as well. There's a whole bunch of titles that are newer. New to me, newer to gaming in general, that I think are incredible. That managed to do something new with something old and still managed to be some of the best games I've played. It still managed to be things I would never want to miss out on. Are they doing anything new? I don't think so. Depends which one you pick here. I mean, Paris is basically just a polyomino placement with some interesting twists and adjustments to the mechanic in the way that you are both setting the groundwork and then placing the polyominoes. Something that I've seen done before, but the last time I saw it done, it was on your own personal board. This is on a shared board, so you're setting the groundwork, you're claiming and laying stake to the ground, but only partially because some areas are shared, and then you're also grabbing tiles to place down. And then you're choosing between placing tiles or taking actions. Nothing here is new, but the combination of them results in one of the best two-player experiences I have in my collection. We have Welcome to the Moon, which is definitely the furthest thing from being new. It's literally a copy of Welcome to Your Perfect Home. It's just a copy with 8 different maps inside of it and almost a story sequence. It takes that core concept that they put into one game and it gives you 8 more of them in another game. And they're all so much fun to go through. I see no reason to own Welcome to Your Perfect Home anymore, except for the fact that my wife would murder me if I got rid of it, so that's a good reason, arguably. But Welcome to the Moon is the same concept, just refined and iterated upon, and manages to be so much more enjoyable, giving variety to the same story beats, giving you a sense of story to what is definitely not a story-based game. It's a flip and write. But now there's a narrative progression and different mechanics twisted into the same general concept, so that you can go through 8 games in a row before and still feel like everyone was different because they are different, and then start and repeat. And there's a whole legacy aspect of cards you unlock. I haven't even gotten to that. I don't even know what's going on with that yet. I think more campaign than legacy. We have Mythic Mischief. It's abstract strategy with your own asymmetric characters. Nothing's new? Question mark? But it manages to feel very different than anything I've ever played. And be incredible. Not just different, but incredible. I mean, the way you have to plan around your opponent, the slight degree of chaos that you can manipulate things, the way there's always a pathway forward, but the question is, you're trying to slow them down. You can't stop them, but you can slow them down. And if you can slow them down better than they can slow you down, or if you can find that brilliant move that lets you get 2 tomes at once and move out of the way of the Tome Keeper, there's ways to win. It's so good, and yet, again, I don't know if it's doing anything new. It's just combining and rehashing different things together into a single entity, a single game that I can't wait to get the final copy. We have Anno 1800. Anno 1800 from Martin Wallace, from Ubisoft and Cosmos. I don't know how it works, but it does. You just have a whole bunch of tiles in this marketplace, and everyone's gathering these resources, and then you can go ahead and use other people's engines to go ahead and pay them basically trade tokens to use their thing to develop your own trade engine. And it's basically like a combination of if you can merge Catan and if you merge that with Brass Birmingham and you combine the two of them and you end up with this Anno 1800 that, again, I don't know if it's doing anything different or unique, but it's so much fun to play and it's so refined and so well done. We have Mind MGMT. I mean, this is definitely not new. We've seen hidden movement before. We've seen hidden movement done time and time again, and time and time again is probably relative. We've seen it done at least 10 times or so. More than that, but 10 times that might have been notable or worth paying attention to. Mind MGMT, Mind Management, is just another one in that cycle, but what's it doing that's different? Okay, you can only hit the same spot once. You can't go back on yourself. I mean, is that really enough to make or break a game? Apparently, yes. Apparently, it is. Throw that in with evolving shift packages and something that arguably is innovative, but we have campaign games and unlock, so it's not really innovative. But again, the combination of different things in Mind Management gives me the best hidden movement game I've played yet. And I'm saying that even as yes to all those who ask. I have played Beast, and I can't wait for the final copy, and I will compare them when I get the final copy there. Until then, I just love both. Okay, just hold off on that. Then we have Unsettled. Unsettled is definitely not new. It's basically cooperative Vindication with a dash of exploration thrown in, and a dash more story that was never really present in Vindication. But ultimately, the same puzzle is there. It's all about how to utilize these abilities you'll get from a variety of cards. Sure, the cards are a different shape. That's not really innovation, but it manages to be incredible and amazing. Not better than Vindication, not worse than Vindication. Well, worse than Vindication. I prefer competitive, but both are amazing at what they do, and Unsettled is so good. It's just so good, and it's worth paying attention to. Going through my 169 games and going through the ones that are new to me, the ones that really stand out, the games that I am compelled by and interested in, I can't say if anything new is really coming out. I can't. But I can tell you that innovation, iteration, exploration, we're constantly revising what we have. And when you revise what you have, you will have a lot of duplicates. You will have a lot of chaff that needs to be sorted through. This is going back to that original video. This is the same idea that when I say there are 500 games a year, stop buying new games, I mean it. Stop buying new games. The statistical likelihood of just the number of games we have, the number of mechanics we have, means we're constantly building the same exact thing again and again and again. You are paying the price of acquisition. You're paying the price of the game itself. You're paying the price of learning the game, of teaching the game, the physical shelf space, the mental headspace. Those are all costs that you're contributing to what is effectively you being part of the beta program of figuring out where the amazing stuff lies. But there definitely is amazing stuff within there. And so the last video is true. Board games are getting old. Board games are coming out again and again and again. There's constantly new stuff. There's constantly new games without having new stuff. There's constant iterations upon worse versions of games that already exist. My bias towards the old is as heavy as my bias towards the new. When I play something new for the first time, I'm constantly comparing against the fact that, hey, I love that older game. Do I really need... I'm in the middle of learning Uthia right now. I'm in the middle of the rulebook for Uthia, and I'm sitting there and thinking, this is a whole lot of work to get to a game. I could just be playing Gloomhaven. Why am I signing up for this? There's always that aspect, that challenge of my bias towards the old. My bias towards the equivalent that I know and love. And so why am I putting myself through the work and the energy, and how many plays do I need to give it before I sit there and say, is it better or worse than Gloomhaven? Which also means, by the way, that the bias is really there. It is. And so when I pick out games that I love that are new to me, it's usually because I love them, that they're incredible, that they managed to be something that was worth persevering forward towards. Don't buy new games. Stop buying new games, as the last video said. But also understand that even as you do or don't stop buying new games, understand that there is or are constantly new games that come out every single year that iterate and innovate and do something better with the same materials. They hit the same story notes, but they do so differently. They write a different sentence here, a different paragraph there. They introduce that character to this character at a different point in the story, and the net result is something that is better. It has all the same mechanics, all the same ingredients, but you baked it in the oven at a slightly different temperature, or you mixed in the eggs after, and now I'm just starting to really just get all off onto the left field with whatever analogy this is going with. But the idea is true. I keep reading new books. Well, I barely read anymore, but I try to read new books. I keep listening to new music. I keep watching new TV shows, new movies, and I recognize I will never stay on top of all of it. And to a certain degree, in most of these side hobbies, I kind of let the crowd choose for me. I watch the movies that my friends say are the best, unless they say Marvel, in which case I just watch it no matter what. Which I shouldn't, but they locked me in at this point. I'm 20 movies deep. What am I going to do? I watch the TV shows that Netflix says are #1 trending, and my friend says you have to watch it. It's really, Chernobyl is so worth your time, energy, and attention, and it is, by the way, it is. Although the first episode is the best, the rest of it is still amazing, but not as good as the first episode. I play the video games. That's not true. I don't really play video games anymore. I used to play the video games that people selected for me. The only real difference for me with board games is board games, I somehow have that urge to try it all. Even as I know that I shouldn't. Even as I know that I should let time, people, money, resources all be filters towards just playing the best ones. Board games are getting old. Board games are rehashing the same territory time and time again. but there are still incredible games to find every single year. Jaws of the Lion, Dune Imperium, Wingspan, Ark Nova, Lost Ruins of Arnak, Marvel Champions, Cascadia, Cthulhu Death May Die, Sleeping Gods, and Beyond the Sun. 2019 through 2021. Those are all, whatever those are, 12 games that are worth paying attention to. They did something different, and they did something in a way that captured a lot of people's attention, a lot of people's ratings and rankings, and have stuck around for long enough. And people continuously try them. Some of them they're not a fit for. That's the nature of the game. And others see why they've found their spot in the sun. Don't have anything else to go from there. That's basically it. There's lots of good games out there, I guess is my point. So, for my brother, on the off chance you're watching this, there are a lot of great games. These are some that I'll be trying to bring into with me next time to show you. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, have a good one.